2.
Awesome.
And we are live on Zoom.
Hello, everyone who's joining us. Please go ahead and introduce yourselves in the chat. Make sure to change your setting there to all panelists and attendees. We'll start promptly at 12:30. Hi, everyone who's joining us. Please go ahead and introduce yourself in the chat, and we'll start promptly at 12:30. Hello, everybody. Welcome to our K-12 Online Teaching Academy. I'm Stephanie Eichley-Chang. I'm coming to you from San Jose State, co-hosting along with Brian Chung-Dooley today. And we have a great session today with Didi Camarena. Sorry, Didi. She'll be talking to us about engaging emerging multilinguals in an online setting, which is a great topic that we are diving into today. She's a coordinator of the ELD program for the Santa Clara County Office of Education. So come in here locally for us today. I'd like to go over a few announcements before we begin. First of all, a recording of this webinar today will be available afterwards at the link where you registered, and also will be sent out by Brian. Captions will be available in the recording, and they are available at the bit.ly address that he will drop in the chat. A reminder that your video and your audio are turned off automatically today. So if you could please use the chat or the Q&A to ask questions. We will try to monitor those along the way, and Didi will be answering questions along the way. And also, just to let you know, Didi will be attending our after debrief session today. So you can interact in a more informal way to ask questions if you would like to attend that after this webinar ends. Just a reminder, if you would like to join our Facebook group, our LinkedIn group to kind of network and talk with others and just see what's going on and share, the addresses are there and they're dropped in the chat as well. So I will go ahead and turn it over to Didi now, and she will begin and share her screen. Welcome, Didi.
There we are. Hello, everybody. As you heard, my name is Didi Camarena, and I'm here today to present for you engaging emerging multilinguals in an online setting. And very first thing straight out of the gate that I would like to do is just get a temperature check on how are you feeling? How are you doing in the midst of the craziness that's going on? As you see on the screen, I have a couple different questions. If you'd like to choose one to reply in the chat box, that helps me get a temperature check on how we're doing. First one is just that. How are you doing? Are you anxious? Are you happy? School's out, you're not in. What are your biggest struggles right now? Are you finding time for yourself and that self-care that's needed? Are you really trying to find materials for your upcoming school year? And are you ready? Do you feel as if you're ready for those emerging multilinguals? So just go ahead and respond to one of those in the chat box, just to get a temperature check on how you're doing today. And Stephanie, if you wouldn't mind just reading off a couple of those so I can get a gauge of where we're at.
Sure. I'm seeing the biggest struggle is having faith in my school district board to make a safe plan for reopening. So I think there's a lot of concern about how reopening is going to happen with the districts. Some are saying they're doing well. Some are saying, you know, trying to relax a little bit. trying to find time to hang out with the family, but also kind of feeling a little bit overwhelmed and trying to plan.
I completely can sympathize with you. I have the same concern as far as those distant learning plans for schools and which plan are they going to choose or which models are they choosing, and did they include our multilingual learners in their plan? So for me, it's a big issue as well, and it's nerve-wracking because we don't know quite what's going on at this point. So I'm hoping at least today's presentation will give you some ideas of how you can support them, whether you're on a blended learning, all online learning, when the fall does come. So let's go ahead and jump in. So just some reminders for you here via Zoom webinar. First and foremost, be flexible. We all know technology can be crazy. Addition, I have dogs in the background, so you may hear their yapping a little bit. Also, if you choose to speak and it might be more appropriate in the debriefing, just go ahead and state your name first. And as we've already come into, be sure to mute your sound while you're here. And there are going to be, I believe, 7 different occasions to actively participate today of the different tools that I'm going to show you. So go ahead and jump in and do that. And as you've been doing, go ahead and use that chat box in case you have any specific questions that you would like to ask. And as we go along the way, I'll be stopping periodically to answer some of those questions for you. All right, so I wanted to give you a visual first and foremost of our roadmap for today. And the goal for today is to be empowering yourselves and engaging those multilingual learners in that online setting. So first and foremost, we must understand and connect with our multilingual learners. So we must be able to see them and know their presence and know that they are there, and they must be able to feel that as well. Then I would like to review opportunities for comprehensible input. Then we're going to discover some platforms to utilize in order to provide interaction within a lesson. Then we're going to review a couple of different of these platforms that are appropriate for each of our ELPAC levels. Our emerging, which also we call our newcomers, our expanding, and our bridging students. And those are based, of course, on the ELD standards. Also, you'll notice here at the bottom right of the screen that there is a bit.ly. That bit.ly is the actual Google folder where I will house all the resources. There are a couple in there now. After the show today, I'll go ahead and put a copy of this presentation in addition to show notes. And in the show notes, I have a lot more information and a lot more different links that's in there too. So hopefully you'll find that as of use. So after we're done today, you'll have my contact information so you can feel free to reach out if you have any questions on there. Okay, so the first topic was really getting to know your students. And this is first thing before you do anything else, any instruction at all whatsoever. You really need to know your students. So you really need to see your students. This is going to help you not only see where they're at academically, but also start building and fostering that relationship with them. So one example that I have here on the screen is what we call a one-pager. And I didn't invent it. I got it from the AVID curriculum, if some of you are used to that. And so as you see on this one-pager is information that will be helpful for other educators. And I specifically say educators because this is not meant to give to any students. Some of the information on here or that you choose to bring on here may be very confidential, that maybe the counselor knows and you knows as the teacher, but nobody else needs to know that. So as you see, the purpose of this one-pager is really to get to know the students and for all educators to have the information that they need to successfully support the student. So some things that I've included on mine is, of course, my name. And as you notice, I put my real name, which says Denise Camarena. I never go by that name ever. Therefore, I put my other name, Didi, which I always go by on there. And as you know, with learners coming from different areas, they may also have a nickname or they prefer their actual given name. So that's important to know. I also put where I could have been born. No, I did not. I was not born in Guanajuato, Mexico. However, I did spend some time down there. So I just did that as an example. And then I also included the information of whom I would live with. Important information because that can give you some background as to maybe the living environment that's in that house. In addition, I put some things that I love to do, my sample schedule, including the teachers, because that is who this document's going to go to, and it helps other teachers know who else has the student. So they might want to go ahead and share ideas or ways of support for that student. Addition, because this is a multilingual learner, I wanted to include the ELPAC and not just the overall score. You need to really be able to dig deep into those ELPAC scores and get the exact one for each domain in order to see where your strengths and areas of growth are for your students. So I made sure to put every single score on there for that. And then I also put some of my favorite subjects. And then the middle part, I put things you should know about me. And I feel that's important because maybe there are some extenuating circumstances that the student would like you to know about, or maybe it's something that the parent told you, which is vital to instruction and supporting that English learner. So I just included some things in there as well that may be helpful to all the teachers in order to give more support for your multilingual students. All right, so we have 3 tips after this. Our tip number 1 is providing comprehensible input. So you all probably already know how to incorporate all the things I'm going to share with you. However, this is a great review of how to strategically use them for your multilingual learners. So the first thing I'm mentioning is about those little things that make a difference. It's so very important to model what you would like your multilingual learners to do. And depending on whether they're at emerging, expanding, or bridging levels will depend on how much modeling you need to be doing. A great way to do that is to be utilizing Screencastify or maybe put videos on YouTube so the students can actually see or what you're going to be doing, what you're going to be modeling. Additionally, you may want to provide lots of visuals. Sketch notes seems to be all the rage these days, and there's a lot of people that I follow on Twitter that are actually actively using sketch notes. And it gives you a great visual as to the learning that was done in any particular session or whatever it may be. Something else you may want to consider is using consistent formatting from size, text, and color, or even font, and repeating those so it's not something that is serving as a barrier for your students. And then in addition, you may want to consider chunking the information. So it's not one long page, rather it's chunked up in different portions that may be accompanied by some guiding questions or an actual visual to go with that. The next part of providing comprehensible input will be to utilize digital tools. We've all, I'm sure, are very familiar with the Google Suite and everything that it has to offer. So for example, you may want to be providing closed captioning. That is something that you can always do, and I'm going to set up right now on this particular slide. Now, what I love about this part, is that you will see at the bottom of the slide everything that I am saying. So people can actually read what you're saying to match what you're saying. For me, it allows me to, or reminds me to articulate better because my words are going to show up at the bottom of the screen. And it may be easier for some students in that it's easier for them to read and to listen at this part of their education. Something else that I would like to remind you of is there's also voice typing that is within Google Docs and Google Slides, in addition to document translation. There's also some extensions that you can get via Chrome, as in a read aloud extension, or a new one that I discovered called IRAD. And IRAD I love because what it does is it films what you do on your screen, therefore giving you a step-by-step account of how to do something. For example, composing an email. And it will automatically record it for you and you can upload it. Therefore, your students have a visual of how to do something. And the last tip I have under providing comprehensible input is to optimize individual choice and autonomy. If some of you are thinking, that sounds different. Well, I took that straight from the Universal Design for Learning guidelines. And this particular one is from the principle of engagement. And considering what we're talking about today, engaging our learners, I felt this was very appropriate. And for choice and autonomy, it's one of those factors that's highly important, especially for our educators and our students, and that they need to know that they have a choice in how they're going to demonstrate their learning. So they may be perceiving the challenge of it, and they'll be able to see which one they would like to utilize if you're giving them choices. They may be determining the color, the design, or the actual final product of what you're asking them to demonstrate. So definitely optimizing the individual choice and autonomy for them so they can choose what is best for them to explain to you what their learning is or what their understanding of something is. Okay, I would like to move on to an example of a Screencastify that I did. Now, please note this is for a 3rd grade class, but it's just going to give you an example of how I incorporated a Screencastify in order to demonstrate what to do for this particular section. And so you know, this is actually part of a presentation that I did, including Pear Deck, which I'll get onto a little bit earlier or later, in addition to a Google Slide document. So I'm going to go ahead and play this one for you just so you can see how you could utilize Screencastify in order to explain or model what you would like the students to do. And the last part you're going to do is this. Work with a partner. That can be anybody in your house. Discuss or talk how the man and the dog are working together. Click here to record your answer on Flipgrid. Remember when we did that in the class? Use the code Camarena6660 and the password is one rescue dog. That's just a reminder because I know you know how to do that. What are they doing in the picture? Use the words from the chart. You can also say, the man and the dog are trying to blank something. You could also say, the dog has a better sense of blank than the man. Or you may want to say the last one. The dog can blank a hole. After you're done with that, you're done with your work for today. All right, so now that you had a little taste of how to utilize Screencastify in order to provide comprehensible input for our multilingual learners, and I've shared with you some other resources, look at what we have on the screen as far as chat box. Why is Screencastify a great tool to achieve comprehensible input? So just take a moment to reflect on that and go ahead and type in the chat box what you think, how you would answer that question. As you can see, I'm really good at wait time, which is something that I like to model, and that it's really important for our multilingual learners. Providing that wait time gives them time to think and really think about in their head how they want to state something, or to maybe they're even translating from their home language to English, and they need that time to be able to think about that. So as we continue for today, you can keep this in mind about how you believe Screencastify or some of the other tools could be great for achieving that comprehensible input. Okay, so I just wanted to take a little break in between our tips today. And you'll see 3 of these slides, this being the first one, called Food for Thought. And it's a question for you to think about in regards to what you just listened to and what you just heard. As you see on the screen, there is a bit.ly because we are going to be documenting how we respond to this question within a Padlet. So I know Padlets do not allow you to click on bit.lys. So I'm going to go ahead and copy the entire address and put it in the chat for you so that you can go ahead and utilize the Padlet to answer this question. So there you go in the chat. And the question is, what tools are you considering using to provide comprehensible input? And what I love about putting this on a Padlet for you today is that you will be able to go back to it and see what everyone else is putting on that. So you can use it as a crowdsourcing document, because maybe you'll put something in there that somebody else will want to use, or vice versa. I'm going to go ahead and bring it up here on the screen. And Stephanie, can you confirm for me that you do see the Padlet on the screen?
Yes, we see it.
Perfect. There we go. And we already have anonymous. Go ahead and typing in there. And if you're not familiar with Padlet, just go ahead and come down to the bottom here. There is a pink plus button. And when you click on that, it will allow you to type in anything you'd want. You can make links in addition to it, as you see down here. You can upload something, you can look for something, search it on Google, and there's all these different features that you can do with it. So if you haven't used it before, it's well worth the exploratory time in order to write different things that are in here. So again, I went ahead and posted that question for you on here as well. What tools are you considering using to provide comprehensible input? If you have something that you're already using that we haven't discussed, great, go ahead and put it on here as well. That will allow others to see it, and you can share what you're already doing that you know that is working. So let me just take about 2 minutes and just go ahead and upload on here something that you believe, oh, there we go. That's going to be providing comprehensible input. I'm already loving what I see. I see lots of paired up people like myself. I see Jamboard, which is going to be coming up today as well. And some of you are used to Screencastify. And I see one that also put Desmos and Edpuzzle, which I love as well. And I see one from Nearpod, and I see a couple different districts doing that. It's going to be on the notes when I go ahead and put those in the drive as well. And let's see if anything else. We have Loom Socrative. I love Socrative. I used that a lot when I taught high school. And I see some Khan Academy and oldie but goodie Kahoots. It still gets everyone really involved. And Mrs. Diaz put even a picture of Edpuzzle on there. So thank you for doing that. And we still have a couple more coming in as well. It sounds like you all are very well versed in tools that you can already utilize with your multilingual learners. So it sounds like we are off to a fantastic start. So let's go ahead and continue for today. So we're going to move on to tip number 2, and that is providing multiple ways to interact. Before you're going to determine how you're going to interact, you may want to determine how you're going to be grouping your students. So for multilingual learners, they come at different levels. We have the actual ELPAC level, levels 1, 2, 3, and 4, or you can also have it by California ELD standards level, which are your emerging, your expanding, and your bridging. Note to self that you definitely, when you're grouping your students, you definitely want to group them by proficiency level, or maybe 1s and 2s and 2s and 3s and 3s and 4s, in order to provide appropriate scaffolds and support for your students. So that's just a note when you are going to be grouping them either within your classroom or also when you're doing online learning. Now, if you are going to be doing synchronous learning, which of course is learning as we are now in real time, I highly suggest you use part 2 of the California English Language Development Standards. And part 2 is how English works and focuses in a lot on grammar. And then part 3 are those foundational skills. Foundational skills are highly important for those learners that come over that may have a gap in their education, and you're going to need to address those foundational skills in order to support them and learning and having access to the content that you're going to be delivering with them. So for synchronous learning, again, I highly suggest you utilize parts 2 and 3 of those California ELD standards. Whereas if you're going to be doing asynchronous learning, meaning learning online, but not with you at the same time, I suggest that you use part 1 of those California ELD standards, and those are entitled Interacting in Meaningful Ways. So you can give them different ways to interact as we're discussing here today, and also they would be aligned to the California ELD standards. So in order to give you a snapshot of those California ELD standards, this that you see here on the left-hand side is called the Visual Guide to the ELD Standards. I went ahead and already put that in your Google folder, and it's just one page and it's one snapshot of the standards versus them differentiated between grade level. So if you just need a snapshot of it, I have that resource available to you. Some other ways to interact, as you've all been talking about, as we did already on the Padlet. We have all of the different resources between here that we have in Zoom, which is very, very close to the features that they also have in Google Meet. So you have things like muting and chatting, pinning a participant, you have your captions on or off, as you see here at the bottom of the screen, screen sharing, annotating, and whatnot. There are so many different things you can do between Zoom and Google, and then also incorporating those maybe into Google Classroom. One extension that I absolutely love that comes with the Google is your Jamboard. And I saw that some of you are already using Jamboard as well. And what I like about Jamboard is not only can you put some content in there, but you can also have different colors, have different fonts, and really personalize it for the students that you're going to have looking at this. And we're going to try that in just a little bit. You see the pair on there, and by what many of you put on the Padlet, you all are very well acquainted with Pear Deck. It is my absolute favorite tool to utilize with students now because it does already have built in so much active engagement with it. One feature that I really love about it is that it automatically puts up that social emotional check at the very beginning as how are you feeling today? So you can get that temperature gauge with your students. Additionally, here on Zoom, you also have the polling feature that's on it. So if you want to ask it that way and actually be able to see those results and share them with your students, you can go ahead and utilize the poll feature as well. All right, so moving on, I would like to actually have us experience a Jamboard. And again, Jamboard is part of Google and an extension that you can get that comes with it. As I see many of you did put on there that you are using Jamboard as well. So I'm again going to go ahead and put the link in the chat for you to Jamboard. There you are. And I'm going to go ahead and open it up on my end as well. You see it here, the front part, but I'm going to go ahead and link on it for myself so we can bring that up. All right, so something to know with Jamboard is that it allows you a total of 20 different boards. So today I made sure I filled up all 20 boards. So any of you can go ahead and jump onto whichever board, because as you will see, they're run all together. It's the exact same board, and you can just practice manipulating what is already there. So for those of you that aren't familiar with Jamboard, we have all of our controls here that are on the left. The first one is the pen. And that, of course, allows you to utilize different colors. We have our eraser, our pointer, sticky notes, which is how I made these that you already see on here. And you can change the color as you see. So this was just one I just created, and you can change it for anything that you'd like it to say. You can also add up pictures, as I've done here. And you can have a laser so that you can see exactly where I am at. So as some have already done, you can go ahead and switch. Oh, many of you have already. And you just click on it to move it over. Whoops, I guess I better change what I'm doing here, huh? And you can move your features over to whichever side that they are. So this allows your students to manipulate things in addition to accessing information from them about how well they're doing. Are they understanding the content? So if you haven't had a chance already, just go ahead and take a minute and just manipulate it. You maybe want to add things to it. I can see people now just moving things around. Another thing you might want to have them do is actually add their own. And that's just a different way to scaffold it depending on the levels of your multilingual learners. So I have school and home, but maybe you want to have them add a different category of something else that you've been covering in the classroom. Or you can even have them create their own. There you go, add your own right there. So again, I really love this because it has so many different variations that you can do depending on the level of your learners that are in your classroom. So even if you have your multilingual learners, you're going to have non-multilingual learners as well. And so maybe there's Jamboard is going to look a little bit different for that. So I'm glad that you've had some time to go ahead and manipulate what is in there and see how highly interactive it can be. As you can see, there are different parts up top as far as background, if you want to clear a board, if you want to duplicate a board, as I have done as well. So you can spend so many different hours doing one of these if you would like. But again, it's just a different manipulative resource that you can use for your students. All right, so let's give you all a chance to just take a break and reflect on this portion for today. And the food for thought, I guess I better go back to our board, is how are you going to have your emerging multilinguals interact? So let's go ahead and go back to that Padlet and go ahead and put our answer in there. Go. And again, just go ahead and add your pencil and go ahead and click and update it that way. I'll go ahead and type in the question to reflect upon. And here's your question here. Whoops, as it's disappearing on me. This just gives you some time to process some learning that you might have had. You might even have some questions as well. So I just saw one come up, which I've heard from a lot, is that there's so many things I need to learn online, blended learning, and it's causing some anxiety. Some tips on that one. So in my position, I had to learn a lot in order to be able to do this as well. Luckily, I love to learn and I go down rabbit holes all the time learning new things. But something that I wasn't told, which I think may help some of you, is choose a handful of things and repeatedly use them. So maybe you're going to use Jamboard, maybe you're going to use Google Slides, and maybe you're going to use the platform of Nearpod. And that's it. And you're just going to start off the year like that. That is 100% completely okay. Choose a couple things to get really good at, and then roll those out to those students. And once you feel as if they're comfortable with those, then add on another one if you feel the need, and add some more variety into it. Do not think you need to know everything at once. When I started doing Zoom, so many different things went wrong with it, and it's just where we are and where we find ourselves, and everyone makes mistakes. And it might even be good for your students to know, hey, I messed up, but you know what? That's perfectly fine. I'm going to keep going because it didn't hurt anybody and everything's okay. So let's just keep moving. We'll learn from it, right? So thank you for doing that. Okay, Stephanie, is there any burning questions that you see coming up that I could address at this time?
I think what kind of came up is that people weren't able to get on the Jamboard. So Jamboard has a maximum of 50 people. Have you encountered that?
There we go. Good to know. I did not know that. So there we go. Dee Dee made a mistake, but it's okay. So that's something for us to know. If anybody knows if there is an actual Jamboard, maybe there's something that you can purchase to have more than 50 people. Has anybody come upon that knows about Jamboard? If so, just go ahead and put that in the chat, and then I'll go ahead and have Stephanie relay that to us. But that's really good to know. All right. So let's go ahead and continue with our tip number 3 today. So this one, I could have spent so many different hours vetting so many different resources, but I decided to just choose 2 resources or 2 appropriate apps for our multilingual learners. And as you notice, I went ahead and put them by emerging, expanding, and bridging levels as far as the ELD standards, in addition to where it would fall under the ELPAC level. And depending on what you're having your students work on will depend, of course, on what type of app or website you'll have your students going to. So I went ahead and chose 2 for each level that I found very beneficial for our English learners. But before you even start with technology, and this is very important with your emerging students, your newcomers, your ELPAC level 1s, I highly suggest you assign them a tech buddy. If they're not comfortable, or if they haven't utilized the extensiveness of online resources and tools that we are using or that you're presenting in your class, they need to have a buddy for that. And yes, they can have you, but they may be timid and not want to talk to you, but they befriended somebody in the class. So maybe that person's going to be their tech buddy, where they can work on things together, or they can contact them if they have an issue that comes up, and they can talk about it together. All right, so for our emerging or our newcomers, our ELPAC level 1s, we have 2 websites that I found very, very helpful for that level. The first one is Brainpop ELL, which we're going to go ahead and try in a little bit. And there's also Brainpop Español. So if you do have native speakers of Spanish that come into your classroom and we need to develop that language in addition to English, the Brainpop Español is another resource for them. What I like about this is that it has a placement test. So it allows them to take that first to determine where they are. And then they have levels 1, 2, and 3 that they'll be placed in. There's free stuff for the teacher, and there's also a content index. So you can choose particular content maybe that you're covering in class. The ELL 2.0 I discovered because it has a personalized vocabulary list, and that you can put it in English, and then it will pop up in all these different languages. It will auto-populate, and you can choose the languages that you want to put them in there. So maybe it's something for you, maybe it's something for your students, but you can determine how you want to use that. Additionally, it has personalized dictionaries that students can use, and it also has games and learning and so many more things that are on this website. So for ELL 2.0, I think it's a great resource if you're trying to go get the most bang for your buck with resources. It's definitely a website to check out. And then the Brainpop ELL is a great one in order to actively engage, for your students to actively engage and figure out where they are within levels 1, 2, and 3 as well. The next one I have is expanding, or for ELPAC levels 2 and 3, because they do cross over. There are 2 that I recommend for that, and both of them have to do actually with listening and understanding what they're listening to. So first we have Randall's ESL Cyber Listening Lab. And with the activities that they're going to be chosen to listen to, it's labeled easy, intermediate, or hard. So you'll be able to tell by the level of your students which one would be appropriate for them. As with our emerging levels, there's so much that they're trying to get out of vocabulary that I didn't think it was appropriate for that level. But by the expanding levels, they have a little bit more vocabulary with that. So you may want to start them off at the easy level with that, and they can continue with that. The next one that I have appropriate for the expanding level is called ESL Video. What I loved about this is it takes topics or shows such as Friends, which we all know about, or what's popular since 2020 right now and trying to get everyone to count. I'm sure you've seen all those commercials, or like a movie like Jumanji, and it gives you a video with it, and then it asks you questions that are related to that video. So you're getting a comprehension check in addition to they have to be listening, right, in order to be able to understand those. Some of you are probably thinking, that sounds a lot like Edpuzzle. It is similar to Edpuzzle. They may have different things for them to listen to on there, so it's well worth the time to check them out or compare it to Edpuzzle. And then for our bridging or ELPAC levels of a high 3 or 4, I recommend something called vocabulary and lyrics training. So vocabulary, I loved it because when it pulls up, they have like a hip hop video with words that are on it, and you're just grooving to it. But then they have all these activities to do with that specific video at the end. And so for me, I'm thinking if I'm a teenager and I'm into music, that's going to be huge because I'll be learning, but I may not be knowing I'm learning, or I know I'm learning, but this is way more fun than just doing vocabulary in the classroom with a vocabulary sheet. That's super boring. It's not productive. It's not efficient because it's not in context. Whereas with vocabulary, it is definitely in context with what they're going to be doing. And then I save the last most favorite for me. It's called lyrics training. And I discovered this on a Friday and I was there for 2 hours and I was playing along. If you don't know about lyrics training, oh my gosh, it is so much fun. So you get to go in and pick a different genre of music, whichever one you want. So for example, they had Michael Jackson's Beat It. And this one you have the video and then you have two options. Either below it will put the lyrics, but it will be missing a particular lyric, or they have choices for the missing lyrics on the side and you click on the lyric that you believe is missing. And because it's music, it's catchy, it really gets them involved, just as vocabulary. In addition, they really have to have precise listening skills in order to be able to do that. And if you're going to have them type in the word that's missing, which you'll find on the bottom, they have to know how to spell it as well. So that was so much fun for me, going through and finding all the different music genres and what would be appropriate for certain levels of students. With the lyrics training, the feature that I love the most about it is that you can actually individualize each song that you would like your students to do. So maybe you found a song that's appropriate for your emerging students and your expanding and your bridging students. Some are slower than others, so some might be more appropriate for bridging, which is why I put it here, than let's say emerging and expanding. And you can go in and you can determine what vocabulary is omitted. So if you're talking about transition words in your classroom, maybe you're going to be omitting all the transition words from a song, and they're going to have to fill them in and determine which one fits in there. So I love the personalization feature of that. And I love the fact that they can really get into it and enjoy what they're doing and learning that vocabulary as they're listening to that music that's there.
May I ask a question, Dee Dee?
Of course.
Lots is coming up in the chat about cost for these different platforms. Are these free? Are there minimal cost, or what do you know about that?
I'm so glad you asked. So every single one is free, I believe, except for vocabulary. That might have like a free feature, but in order to get all of them, it's a little bit more cost. So I'm hypersensitive to that because with our students, they all don't have access to technology, as we know. When you do see the show notes, there's a whole section that I have on no tech. And so if students need something and they don't have tech available, or there's 5 people in the house and there's only one device and it happens to be a phone, you need some no tech features that go with that. So while this is about providing support for online learning, I definitely did include some no tech features and made sure that almost 95% of the things I'm showing you today do have no cost. Anything else come up, Stephanie?
I think that's mainly what's coming up in the chat right now, is they're interested in the tools and interested in the cost. So thank you for sharing that.
Right, of course. Okay, Brainpop ELL. This is one that I'm going to go ahead and put in the chat box if you would like to open it up as well. There you go. I'm going to go ahead and open it up on my screen as well. So as I mentioned, on the right-hand side, you have your features: placement tests, levels 1, 2, and 3, in addition to the content index and the free stuff. We're teachers. We beg, we borrow, and we steal, and it's all okay because why reinvent the wheel, right? So that, just with those different levels and the different features that it has, that is appealing to me for it. Notice you have a quick tour of how to use it here, and then something just for you as teachers. So there's different ones that are scrolling through. Obviously, they're addressing what we're getting ready to celebrate is the 4th of July. So there's different ones that go with that. I'm just going to go ahead and click on one so you can get an idea of what it looks like. it doesn't leave you in the lurch. It gives you some more support up here with the lesson ideas of how you're going to teach that. Here we have movie, we have vocabulary, and then if you continue on the bottom, there are more activities to do with this particular clip. So it's engaging, it goes at the level that it needs to according to how they placed within that placement test that's there. You'll notice also it has your closed captions here. You can do full screen or not. And then again, all the different activities that you have at the bottom. So there's different things that you can play with and go through. When I first discovered this, I went through and clicked on all of them so I could see how they were utilizing them and how they go with the video. And I absolutely loved it. I felt it covered a lot of different bases that were out there that our students need support with. So this is definitely one of those that ranks high up there with me as well, just because I feel it was really supportive, especially for our newcomers, for our emerging multilinguals, that level. And then as you can see down here, it comes in all of these different versions. So if you happen to be here in your elementary, it has a K3. They also have it in French, and then something for us all just as educators. And of course, the quote unquote regular version, the original version that comes with it. All right. All right, we are back down to our last Padlet with the question, how will you ensure your emerging multilinguals are using appropriate apps? Again, not all apps are appropriate for all levels. You really have to go through and vet them to see which ones are appropriate for which levels that you have in your classroom. And especially if you have non-multilinguals and multilinguals, determining if it's appropriate for both. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this for us and put it in our Padlet. So on the top left, you see is our latest question for reflection. If you haven't used Padlet before, there are different formats that you can do for it too. I just decided to put everything on one, and then it's a resource for us just to add to it, but there's different ways you can format the Padlet as well. I love the fact that someone mentioned parents and guardians. So when we go back to that one pager that was at the very beginning, that is huge as well. You'll notice when you read the show notes, I added different links for different ways that you can communicate with the parents. There's various ones you can use. Remind might be one that you're going to use. Talking points is another huge one that you can use to communicate with them, and that you can put it in English. And when they receive it, it will show up in the language that they chose for it to show up in, and vice versa. Definitely test those apps ahead of time to make sure they work. Case in point, this particular Padlet, I found out about a half hour before coming on today that it wasn't organized like I wanted it to. So I had to recreate it. Luckily, it was nothing major and it was easy to do. But if I hadn't have tested it, then we wouldn't have been able to do this today. Checkouts, I love that as well, and modeling. I've seen various Google Forms as far as checking in and checking out with students. Even it can be utilized as a social emotional check or just where they are. And so you have a reference to go back to if the student has filled that out. I love this other comment that someone put. Honestly, I'm sticking to the ones my district is providing training on right now. I highly, highly suggest doing that. I'm working with another district and they, I believe, are using Pear Deck, Zoom, Nearpod, and Cami. Tammy's an annotating tool. I believe that's in my show notes as well. And those are the ones that they're investing in and they're training their teachers on. So teachers are armed with resources in order to utilize during their distance learning with their students. So if you already have those that your school district is using, stick with those and get used to those. You'll have lots of support because hopefully you've gotten training from your district and how to use those. And then your colleagues, they may be experts on some of those. And so you can rely on the support of your colleagues as well. Just seeing if there's anything else that came up.
I do have some questions from
Okay.
the Q&A whenever you're ready.
I am ready to go.
Oh, okay, great. What are some structures to get students talking remotely that you use?
So obviously there's the breakout rooms that you can do, and Google has them as well. But before you put them in breakout rooms, they must understand what they need to be doing and the discussions that they're having with that. I would arm them with, first of all, getting them all together and explaining what they're supposed to be doing in their groups. And then in order for accountability's sake, I would have them on a document where you have one person that's in the breakout room recording anything and the others are contributing that's going with that, so that everybody gets an equitable amount of time to participate with that. And then it's also documented that goes with that. But most importantly, they need to understand what they're supposed to be doing in those breakout rooms in order for them to be able to participate.
Great, thank you.
Anything else come up?
Yeah, so here's another one. With many of our ELs not having any ELPAC data in 2020 due to COVID-19 closures, do you recommend starting instruction at their 2019 levels? And or do you have suggestions to get a sense of their current ELPAC levels remotely?
This comes up all the time, and we're waiting for guidance still from the state as to whether they are going to fund the continuation of the Summit of ELPAC in the fall. So we're still waiting to hear that because obviously there's a lot of manpower that comes with that and a lot of different technicalities that come with that as well. So if you can look into your district and see if they have another evaluation test that is being used in the district. For example, some people have their district benchmarks test. So maybe they've already taken a benchmark test that you can gather data from in order to determine what level it is that they are at. There's another popular is Fontes and Pennell. They have an evaluation system as well that has benchmarks that go with that. And then we have DRA, which is another one that comes with that. Regardless, I highly suggest you do assess the students when they do come in, because not only is if they haven't completed the ELPAC, which very few have, they haven't had that one-on-one instruction. And for all of our students, not just our multilingual learners, there is going to be a gap in their academics, but especially for our multilingual learners, they're going to have a gap in language, or they may have lost some language that goes with that. So whichever test that you do choose to use with that, you need to use something that goes with that. And if you want to pop into the debrief afterwards, we can brainstorm some more ideas of different things that have come up, or specifically what you may have in your district to determine the exact things that you could be using with your students.
Great, thank you. There's another question I do want to ask you, but this again may be when we take over to the debrief because it seems pretty big. Okay. Can you talk a little bit about when to use these different resources? For example, how can you use them to align with certain ELD standards and content? That's a pretty big question. True.
So when anyone asks me, oh my gosh, how do I do all these standards? You know, same with Common Core standards, right? Or your math or your history, whatever they may be. There are so many standards and there's no way you can teach all of them. So when you're looking at what specific standards to use and then what resources, or as we say, what tech to use with those, I suggest you look at what are your focal standards are going to be. So whenever I'm doing professional learning on the California ELD standards, I always use standard number 1, collaborating, as a standard to go by, because you can use that in every single content area. You're always going to have speaking, you're always going to be conversing. And for our multilingual learners, they must speak and collaborate in order to process the information. Number 1, they have to be able to do that. It might be minimal with your emerging learners, but it does state what they can do and what skills they can do. It might be a yes or no question, but they can do yes or no. And guess what? In Pear Deck, they have that option, yes or no. And so you can make it so that you're meeting them at the level that they're at. But I do suggest you choose an ELD standard to focus on. And then from there, you might want to look at the resources within this presentation that are within this note, the show notes, to determine which one would be a great resource to use to do this or to do that. And again, just pick a couple of them because you don't want to overwhelm yourself or your learners as to all these different apps or websites that they're using. And that might even be something that you pull your students on when they come in on. You might have these 5 resources that you want to use with your students, and then you pull your students of which ones they're comfortable with, and maybe 90% of them are utilizing a website or an app that you're not using. Well, guess what? You have another one that they're familiar with in order to get them actively engaging and utilizing and embedding those standards within that.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I think, yeah, there are a few more questions, but I also would think that, you know, we can move on and people can join the debrief session hopefully as well.
Okay, well, actually, lucky for us, that, let me get back here. That is everything I have for today. And this is one of those that I mushed a whole bunch of stuff into one presentation and I went by things pretty quickly.
Okay.
As
I
said before,
questions.
Yeah, we can totally continue and take a few more questions.
Okay, I think this one is very important about engaging your students and having them show up and participate during distance learning with the multilingual learners. Do you have any suggestions for that?
So I've had various conversations with people. One woman I was speaking with, she was stating that it was the 7th week of shelter in place there for remote learning. And there are a couple students that she had not heard of. She had not seen, nothing. And honestly, with those, what comes down to it is make a phone call. Call, touch base with your student, touch base with the families. Just be able to find out where they're at and what are their barriers for not being able to participate. Is it not enough technology? Is it their parents are back at work and they're the oldest sibling and they need to take care of their siblings. They don't have time to go online, much less the means to maybe be able to access technology. So making that phone call to determine where they're at in order for them to participate, that I would highly suggest to do. It goes from there. And then once they are on, having structured protocols in place to ensure that everybody will be able to participate is very important. Something that's very easy to do that you can do no tech, or you can do asynchronously or synchronously, is a simple Google Doc where students have to use a particular color. We do that in elementary, middle, high school, all over the place. But if they're using a different color, then you can guarantee that all the students in one particular group have participated. If they are working in breakout rooms, again, if you have one document that they all can put their information on, their response, whatever it may be, that is a way to ensure that they're going to be participating as well. I also highly suggest having one-on-one check-ins with your multilingual learners, especially when we get to our high expanding and bridging students. They may sound like they're perfectly fine and they don't need support, but they're still considered a multilingual learner. They haven't passed that ELPAC test yet. So they do need check-ins in order to get over that hump. And the only way that you might be able to really dig deep with that and have your students trust you and be able to set goals and push them is to have the one-on-one conferencing with them. In my perfect world, if I were back in the classroom, not only would I have Zoom meetings or Google Meets with my whole class, but I would break them up by those proficiency levels in order to have a time for our designated ELD. And then for the ones that are truly struggling, that I've noticed that they haven't been participating, set up a particular meeting just with them on the phone or via Zoom, whatever it is, to come down to, okay, what are your struggles right now? What are you having issues with? As we've learned from Maslow and his hierarchy of needs, they have to have shelter, they have to have food, they have to have clothing. If they're not getting those at this time, just due to where we find ourselves, then they're probably not in the right mindset to be in school and learning academically, because they have all these other stressors that are going on in their lives. As long as you have that connection with them, then maybe you can support them from there, which will eventually get them to participate and be involved with the learning that they're going to be doing.
Oh, great answer. Thank you so much. Also, maybe this can be our last question before we pop over to the debrief session. How would all of this work for K and first grade teachers, like when reading and keyboarding is, you know, oftentimes a barrier?
Right. That is what so many pre-K, TK, kinder, a little bit of first grade teachers are doing. That is one where I would most definitely get in touch with your school district and determine, okay, what have they been using in their district thus far with kindergartners? What platforms have they found that kindergartners can utilize in the classroom as far as technology? And maybe it's just one that they'll be able to manipulate. Because with kindergartners, pre-K, TK, first graders, more likely than not, there may be an adult sitting with them if you're going to be on Google Meet or Zoom, and they're going to need some help just maybe getting used to it, especially if they have not had technology before, but now they've received a computer from the school, they have internet connection now with the help of the school. And okay, what do I do now? And they need somebody to help them do that. So by maybe even setting up with a phone, and you can be speaking through the phone to walk them through it, or maybe even going old school and do snail mail, USPS, and send a snapshot and then what to do with that, whether it's in their native language or in English, whatever they prefer. So it can walk them through the steps to get on to the technology that you will be using. Also keep in mind that with your younger learners, they don't have a huge, span. They don't have a huge attention span. So when you're designing instruction for them, keep that in mind. They just have you, but you may get 15 minutes. That's it. That's all you're going to get from them that day. So really keeping in mind of what do you need to be teaching them within those 15 minutes? And then what can they do on their own with the support of an adult that's in the house? So A, make sure you tap into your district to see what resources they're already using for those lower levels. B, set up a way in order to introduce them to the technology if they haven't already. C, go ahead, you might have to utilize snail mail for that. But just really having multiple ways to get them the information is highly important so that we can get them online if it's only for those 15 minutes due to their limited attention span.
Great, thank you so much. I'm going to go ahead and pop on now and just have us wrap up here. Dee Dee will be joining us at our after session right now, and we'll kind of transition over to there. But I wanted to remind you all that this recording will be sent out. Dee Dee has made her slides and resources available, so you have access to all this information. And I encourage you to explore, like Dee Dee said, what your districts are using and what you can really prepare yourself with to be ready for what's coming up for us. So anyway, thank you everybody for attending, and we will see you in the debrief session, hopefully. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Stephanie.